Good morning. It's always so lovely to be with this community. I hope that I can offer a bit of inspiration before we go into our sit today. I will be reading most of this because speaking to a large group is not my strong suit. I just forget everything I wanted to say. Also, I have a lot of quotes in this talk. I've noted them. And I wrote a verse once when I was around 21 that went, why am I a parasite, not thinking on my own, letting others have the big ideas, then using them on loan? Sometimes I think I don't have an original thought in my head, but I do love sharing bits of wisdom that I've learned from others. I chose the song, Lord, Teach Us to Pray, as the meditation song you heard as we gathered, because I knew Joe Wise personally back in the day. He was a local musician and sang with the music ministry at Epiphany before I ever joined there. I was also in a writing group with him in the 90s. Teach Us to Pray is a song from the 60s and 70s, and I love it still. The closing song will be his version of the Our Father, which is one of my all-time favorites as well. And the butterfly visual at the beginning is one of the Hubble photos. It's a symbol of hope for me. The music that Josie put with it had my eyes already leaking before I even began. The thought first occurred to me back in October that I would like to lead the group today. I knew it would be the day after our Dancing with Spirit retreat, and I would have celebrated my 77th birthday on January 6th, which was the Feast of Epiphany. That was also the day 4 years ago that we had the attack on the Capitol, when a group of angry, fear-filled Americans were trying to overthrow our government. Hate was on display big time that day. It's a birthday I will never forget. I remember thinking as I watched the horror of it all, that God is here. I believe that with all my heart and soul. I was glad that it happened on Epiphany too, because that is what Epiphany means to me. God is here. And perhaps my 77th birthday reminded me that Jesus said we have to forgive 70 times 7. 7 just seems to be an important number. And now I'm double sevens. At any rate, that was in October, and now it's 3 months later. And Donald Trump is going to be our president again for 4 years. That could cause me great anxiety and depression. But I remember the promise of Epiphany. God is here, always has been, always will be. And I also remember reading and believing this quote: trust does not mean that everything will be all right. Trust means everything is already all right. I think that ties in with the thought, this is how it is right now. May I be at peace. When the idea of being today's presenter first popped into my head back in October, I had a few ideas of what I wanted to say. When I was young, there were 3 things I was certain I did not want to be: a teacher, a nurse, or a nun. At that time, I thought those were the only options as far as a career went. I guess I have to admit now that I've never had a career. I went to secretarial school and worked as a secretary until I married Joe, my husband, in 1975. I was a month away from being 28. When we married, I became the instant mother of a 6-year-old little boy, and I was a stay-at-home mom after that. Our son Michael was born in 1977, more sevens, and I have always been a lifelong seeker and learner. There's another quote I read recently that spoke to me. Believe those who are speaking the truth, doubt those who find it. That is by Andre Sheed. My theme for today is sharing my experience, strength, and hope. I'll start with this poem I wrote some time ago when I was with a spiritual group called Pathways at Epiphany. It's titled Where I'm From. I'm from country roads and small town friendliness and small town secrets. I'm from a family of people who laugh and sing and joke to hide their true selves and their pain, no matter what. I'm from angels and miracles and trust and hope, and also from fear and pain and brokenness. I'm from poetry and writing and wonder and learning, and from books I've read and classes I've taken, and blessings received, and gratitude and yearning and courage and beauty and joy. I'm from God, and she calls me Judy. In thinking about this talk, it occurred to me that my experience is mostly just the stories I tell. I love stories, both hearing them and telling them. I have a very wise friend who turned 90 last summer. She said one time, "That's my story, and I'm not sticking with it." In reflecting on that statement, it makes sense to me now. At the time, it didn't. There is a danger for me in getting too invested in my stories. They are never big enough. I look at them now as stepping stones along the way of my soul's long journey toward the light. Jesus used stories all the time called parables. I use stories to share my experiences. I had no idea when I suggested that I leave today that Jimmy Carter would die the week before. He and Rosalind have been heroes of mine ever since I met them in the summer of 1997 at the Habitat Building Blitz in Pikeville. That was one of the most impactful weeks of my life. I wrote an account of it right after it happened. I revisited that memory again when Rosalind died in 2023. I have a friend who's connected with the Kentucky Lantern publication, and he edited that story and had it published there. If anyone would like to read the article, I'd be happy to send you a copy. Just I could send it by email. Just let Joe Z know, and he'll give you my email address. An embarrassing thing that happened that week when I mistook an embarrassing thing that happened that week was when I took Jimmy Carter for Tabitha's grandfather. Tabitha was the 13-year-old girl who was going to live in the house our team was building. I'm a very non-visual person, and I live in the world behind my eyes a lot of the time. It was an easy mistake for me to make. Tabitha had just told me her grandpa was going to stop by and see the house that day. So when this elderly gentleman walked in, I stuck out my hand and said, "Hi, I'm Judy Vickers. You must be Tabitha's grandfather." He just smiled and said, "No, I'm not." That's when I realized it was Jimmy Carter's hand I was shaking. He could not have been more gracious. It makes another good story for me to tell. That entire experience of hammering in the hills was one of hope and joy and hard work. I'm still in touch with a woman who was on our team. I had never heard of the Carter Center before that experience, but I've supported it ever since 1997 with a $10 donation each month. It's my small way of being part of Jimmy Carter's dream of a world of peace and justice. I am so grateful my life intersected with his. I read this week that he has donated 1 week of work each year since he started in the 70s of building houses with Habitat. And another example of hope I was reminded of is the play Come From Away. It's playing at the Kentucky Center today. Joe and I saw this play in February of 2022, and I was just rereading what I wrote about it at that time. It was one of the first times that we had been out in a crowd after COVID. I wrote at the time that it was the most heartwarming, uplifting, hopeful plays I had seen in ages. It's based on a true story that took place almost 25 years ago and is about the pure chaos, terror, and tragedy that happened around 9/11. The story took place in the small town of Gander, Newfoundland, Canada, when 7,000 stranded airplane passengers descended on the community and were welcomed in by the people who lived there. The town barely had as many residents as the number that came so suddenly upon them. The people on the plane were from many different faiths, languages, and countries all over the map. As it said in the review, cultures clashed. This is a quote. Cultures clashed and nerves ran high, but uneasiness turned into trust. Music soared into the night, and gratitude grew into enduring friendships, end quote. It reminded me a bit of our experience of hammering in the hills with Habitat. That same spirit of working together and compassion and kindness and caring and good humor was all around. It also makes me very grateful for the arts and how sharing these kinds of stories is so critical to our humanity and keeping our hearts open and showing the creativity that can happen when people work together. Both stories remind me of the goodness of people and the thread that connects us all, our humanity. And that's exactly the reminder I long for in these turbulent times when things can seem so dark. As 14-year-old Anne Frank wrote in her diary so many years ago, in another dark time, I believe that people are basically good at heart. I believe that too. Brother David Steindl-Rast said, quote, in each of us, there is a spark that can reverse the trends of violence and depression spiraling within us and in the world around us. By setting in motion the spiral of gratefulness, we begin the journey toward peace and joy. I think my greatest desire has always been that I might see clearly. For a long time, I have felt that the more I know and understand myself, the more I will know God. My entire life has been a slow journey toward practicing doing that. Once I asked Gus, great universal spirit to me, in my journal, what is my heart's true desire? The reply was, your heart's true desire is to realize that you and I are one. That is the heart's desire. This is from Gus. That is the heart's desire of all sentient beings. It's been covered over by so much ego and false belief that hardly anyone knows or remembers it anymore. Humanity is beginning to awaken, however, and before too long, there will be love and compassion and understanding like there has never been before in all of history. Have faith and trust in that. That was Gus's reply to me. Most of the time, I do trust it. I read once that reality and perfection are synonymous. That rings true to me, but I don't know if it is or not. Another hopeful quote I read was by Kathleen Singh from her book, The Grace in Aging. She says, quote, it is an incredible moment in the life of a human being, a turning point of boundless importance, when the percentages of the wish to awaken and the wish to continue sleepwalking shifts from 50-50 to 51-49. May we all reach the point where the risk to remain tight in the bud is more painful than the risk it takes to blossom. At that point, we enter a noble path. I read in the Earth and Spirit newsletter this week that we can never, quote, this is another quote, we can never truly predict what is going to happen. From quantum uncertainty to the inscrutable complexities of social and political events, the line between blessing and disaster is almost always ambiguous. We can't assume that any given event is a harbinger of total doom or absolute salvation. Life is a blessing, but always a mixed one, a paradoxical weave of lament and longing and loving and celebration. Curiosity lets us engage in the wildly uncontrollable future with the loving open heart we'll need to manage whatever fate may deal us. Mindfulness creates spaciousness. Rather than just reacting instantly, mindfulness helps create a space between stimulus and response, as Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl described it, where we can choose our behavior more consciously and skillfully. In times like these, we don't need hotheads. We need fiercely loving spiritual warriors who can bring clear minds, skillful action, and courageous, compassionate hearts to the myriad needs of our time, especially the needs of the most vulnerable and of the suffering earth. All of that is from Earth Spirit News. I'll end this message with one last reflection written by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but rather of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul to assist some portion of the suffering world will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. She continues, one of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send sparks, build signal fires, cause proper matters to catch fire. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy toward others. Both are acts of intense bravery and greatest necessity. Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do. She says, there will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a cheer for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. In that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall when a great ship is in harbor and moored. It is safe, there can be no doubt, but that is not what great ships are built for. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Thank you all for listening. That was 20 minutes worth of words. Joe, you can stop the recording now and let's have 20 minutes worth of silence.